Welcome to my budget deck channel where I try to make decks as cheap and playable as possible, so if this is something you'd be interested in, then why not subscribe? We are back with 10 ranked games in a row. Very interesting format because I actually get to play the deck a bit more often, get to showcase it a bit more, and try to be as real with it as possible. No cherry picking out the best replays to show off the deck, and then when you build it, it's absolute garbage and you cannot be playing it at all. No, this is trying to achieve a real representation of the deck. Obviously, 10 games cannot really give a good representation of the deck in total, but it will show off what the strengths of the deck are, what the weaknesses are, and how you play it in a certain environment. This time it's not platinum ranked, this time it's gold ranked. The season got reset and I'm still making my way up to platinum. I thought, why not, well, include this in here. It would take a bit longer if I just played myself up to platinum, then did platinum replays, and then at the start of the season, platinum feels more like the lowest bit of diamond at the end of the season, and then you play against Tearlaments only, and this is maybe not what you're trying to do with a budget deck anyway. So I thought, let's start out in gold, let's do it this time and see how far this deck can go. I obviously leave out replays against decks that are mainly in it to, well, do the daily missions, like decks that don't even try to compete. Not saying like rogue decks I won't show, or even like bad decks in a sense, but if the deck obviously isn't meant to compete, or the player does abysmally awful at playing the deck because they're completely new, then I will not show it, because then that doesn't really showcase my deck or their deck or any gameplay at all, because that is just ridiculous. I will show though if I lose against hand traps, and I will show if I lose against very strong decks as well. This one I did lose the coin flip, but I ended up going first anyway, and we are playing against True Draco, no less. So let's see what we can be doing with this specific hand. You will see this combo quite a few times, I imagine. This time we start with Piscalis, so we can actually go into some other combos. A bit of annoying placement here by me. I should have possibly put this somewhere else, because the arrows point a lot of the time to this side, and then we might have a bit of an issue, like you see Angel pointing to this. So you usually want to keep this space free depending on what you have in your hand. Searching the Battle Ocean here, so we have that protection later on. We go into the whole Marincess combo. I decided to go the Crystal Heart route and not go for Marbled Rocks here, just because I felt like the unaffected protection, since I don't have wave, would be nice to have depending on what my opponent is playing. I could have extended here a tiny bit with Spring Girl, but I thought, let's be greedy and actually use the Moray of Greed to maybe get some more disruptions. Didn't get any disruptions, but a good setup for the next turn. At this point onwards, didn't matter much in setting up a bigger board. Now here is where they do a bit of a weird thing. They, for some reason, activate Dimensional Fissure and then activate the effect of Dragonic Diagram, so their monster gets banished. Not that it matters too much, because True Draco only somewhat cares about monsters in the graveyard, and I assume, well, Dimensional Fissure they can easily turn off by themselves, and it's very helpful against stuff like Tearlaments. Thing is, obviously they should have used this after they put down Dimensional Fissure, because with Dimensional Fissure, yeah, their monster that they pop now gets banished. Don't know why they do it, but they did do it. They search another monster, and now they get rid of Dimensional Fissure. They try to draw 2 cards, but I am not going to let them, and I'm also not going to let them search, so they're nearly out of resources here, and now they realize they cannot attack my sea enemy either because of the effect of Argonaut, and we can proceed to our turn. This is where I try to get rid of stuff as quickly as possible. Well, first of all, I'm trying to go into this, and then they negate their own monster. Wouldn't have gone through anyway if they wanted to skill drain my effects, but since my monster isn't affected by skill drain, I can just clear skill drain here and then build up a massive board, and in the end this is what makes them surrender, because there's it's very obvious that I can be going for an OTK here, because I can special summon so many things. We use the other surge, and at that point we just win the duel. Very good, very easy first one. Very happy that the first one went so well. Let's see if we can continue this streak onwards. Second duel, and I lost the coin flip once more, but once more was made to go first. You will see why that is in a second. Let's talk a bit about this hand. 2 Moray of Greed. I can use this to bait an Ash Blossom, because you don't lose out on anything really but 1 card, the Moray of Greed. Then I still have the second one, so if everything goes to plan, they might Ash this, and then I can get rid of those 2 and hopefully draw into another play starter, one of the other good cards, or some disruptions for my opponent's turn, which can be helpful as well. So let's see what happens. So I do use my Ray of Greed here. They do actually Ash Blossom this. Not sure if this is a good move or not, especially if you're playing against Marincess, which they don't know. Could be anything at this point, and I could have bricked in my hand, so can be an okay play, but usually say do not Ash Ray of Greed, just my personal opinion. So I am greedy here, I use it again, and I will be left with nothing playable because I draw into the third Ray of Greed. Imagine being that lucky. But I can still pull off some combos here. I can still go into some plays because this is a very good play starter. I can go into the Link monster and add it back to the hand, then special summon it, then search the other card, then go into the Link 2, then at least end up with the Link 3 and some stuff. It's not great, but it definitely does some stuff. I could also go into the card that special summons from deck and so, well, it doesn't special summon from deck, more from graveyard, and extend the place and possibly end up in a Link 4 that still isn't protected by anything and doesn't have equipped anything, but it could end up in something that isn't completely awful, backed by 2 monster negates. It's not a great turn, but it is a turn in the end. But no matter if we would have used Ray of Greed, we are absolutely screwed here, mainly because of the fact that they have a Gamma, and that would have shut down our combos completely, even with the other hand, because we do not have a monster on board anymore. We could not have summoned anything from our hand anymore. Gamma hits this deck quite hard if it hits it at the right spot, because there's not all that much you can be doing, unless you have Pascalis. Unless they use it on Pascalis again, because they use it on Pascalis, then you can also be completely screwed, unless you have Spin Girl also in your hand, and so on and so on and so on. So we hope we're fine with just setting these two, setting this as well as a distraction, because we won't be able to activate this the next turn either, because we won't be having that many monsters in hand that we don't use. They also have Pot of Desires. Look at that. Gamma, Pot of Desires, Ash Blossom, draw into Numeron Network as well. Not much we can be doing from this point onwards using Numeron Calling. Don't even have to use the Numeron Network effect. So they will be gladly not finishing us because they can't trigger the effects of these monsters. Since we do not have a monster they can battle. So all we need now is a monster so we can start our plays, and from that point onwards we might be able to do stuff, because whatever play starter we get, we can get this one back. Then we can keep on doing some plays at least, unless they have, well, they can't have Gamma, so there's at least this, but they have a one set card. And if this is called by the grave, we're still pretty bad off, and we are awfully off because they have, we have not drawn into a monster, and they still have one 4000 attack per monster that we cannot be stopping at all. So this is already a lost game for us. Nothing we can do. We can only wait till they finish the game. That is what it is. One perfectly timed hand trap can cripple this deck from time to time, and also awful draws here for us. It is what it is. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and this was definitely one of the times that I lost. Let's move on, and hopefully we can snatch a win in the next game. Third replay, and this time we are going first because we won the coin flip, yes to us, and we have a very strong hand unless the opponent has certain hand traps. So let's see what we can end up here with. We have Blue Tang, very nice. They have Ash Blossom here, but that isn't one of the ones that hurts us too much. Yes, it would be annoying if we would be running a version that only has one card play starters, and we would really need the card to be sent to the graveyard that we then add back and then continue to our combo. But since we run a deck that focuses a bit more on monsters and keeps it a bit cheaper, we are still safe off with this one. This is where I decided to go into a bit of a controversial way of doing the combo, because I wanted to chain block Sea Angel, so if which didn't really matter because they already used Ash Blossom here, so it didn't matter too much. But I didn't have a card that I wanted to add back yet, and I possibly wanted to get into a card that I could add back, or I wanted to keep this for later on. I had some kind of plan at this point. I also wanted to show off the chain blocking between those two, just so if your opponent has Ash Blossom, then this can be nice. The only issue is this doesn't have a zone that points downwards, but we do have an enemy now, and that can still be doing some stuff. Now we get this back, so we still have a zone that we can summon Mandarin into. We have Battle Ocean. With Battle Ocean we go into Crystal Heart again, and with Crystal Heart we can make our monster be unaffected because we again didn't draw into the trap card. Very annoying. Now we can get Blue Tang back for the next turn, so 4 cards in hand, 1 unaffected boss monster, and 3 equips plus 1 Book of Moon, so 1 spell trap negate, unaffected monster, and 1 flip face down. The opponent is playing, well, some form of Shaddolls with emergency teleport, funny enough. They could have gone into a Shaddoll monster, but for some reason I thought this was a bit better. Maybe they had, I thought for a second they had a level 7 Synchro that they could have gone into. Apparently they did not. I think they mainly play the emergency teleport to go into the psychic Shaddoll monster. I don't know if you do this in like pure-ish Shaddolls. Apparently they did not have a card in hand that let them get access to any of their fusions, and pure Shaddoll isn't what it used to be anymore. Usually you need to splash in some other engines because they do not have good normal summons. They do lack playability if they don't have a way to go into the fusions and start their plays off. So it's a bit awkward if you don't run specific cards that make this deck a tiny bit better. So we shut that down very, very quickly. We also still had Book of Moon here, so whatever they would have made, I thought about flipping the tuner face down just so they don't have tuner access, but I thought whatever they do, I am still unaffected, and also I can still flip it down if they go into a Synchro monster, so it didn't matter all that much in the end. Could have summoned out the Coral Enemy instead of Crystal Heart, so I have more plays during the next turn, but in the end it didn't matter. Just something to keep in mind. Sometimes it does matter what you summon off. I draw into 1 Tremora. A Tremora, I can start my place here without even having to use my normal summon, can bounce these 2, and then just basically go for the OTK because we have a stacked hand, we have so many plays, we can recycle so much stuff, and we can also search some more things. Now we have a wave. I decided to go for the wave here because the rest didn't really matter that much because I knew I had enough damage on board anyway to finish them off. I already had exactly enough damage on board here without doing all of this, but I'm not very good at maths, so I went 1 extra step that you didn't have to do here, and at this point we finished the game. Well, so far so good. Not against the greatest of all decks, but Shaddoll is at least a fairly decent deck to go up against. It's nothing like Tearlaments, but it isn't absolutely awful, and you could see a bit more of the plays that you can be doing, and you could technically vary it up. You could have gone into like Marbled Rocks at one point, but I decided that the Crystal Heart route was the one that made me happy at this point, and it worked out well, semi-decently. And this time it happened, lost the coin flip and had to go second, and this is usually an uphill battle because, well, decks without hand traps aren't that great at going second, especially not budget decks, so we'll see how this goes. They are playing exactly what picture they have. They're playing Monarchs, and in theory we have some ways of stopping them. We have Book of Moon, for example, so we can be doing certain stuff. They have Domain, not the end of the world if it stays at Domain, but also they go into Monarch's Erupt, which hurts us less than some other decks, but in combination with this and in combination with one very, very important card here, you'll see what this is in a second, we are absolutely doomed. There is nothing that we can be doing if they have the protection, and they have March of the Monarch as well, so we cannot even Book of Moon their Monarch, then run over it by battle and hope that we can go into like a Link 3 and they can't be doing too much to us during their turn, and then we can play through their kind of skill drain card and so on and so on and so on. But yeah, that did not happen. They have effectively a skill drain for us. They have a way for us to not be able to go into our extra deck, and they have a way to protect the Monarch from targeting and destruction. So there's nothing in this world that this deck can do to get rid of this. You would need a Spell Trap destruction, which we do not have. Lightning Storm would have been absolutely great. Is not in here. Harpy's Feather Duster would have been absolutely great, not in here. So there's nothing that we can be doing. I could have put up monsters, I could have chump blocked to infinity and beyond, but I felt like this deck, this game is lost. There's nothing in my deck that could salvage this, and at that point why put up more of a fight than is necessary, because that just costs me time in my life and that costs them time in their life, which I don't necessarily have to care about. But in the end, my time was too valuable to sit through this and just pass, set monster to infinity and beyond, because I knew I didn't have any out in my deck that would have solved the skill drain, extra deck, and destruction protection and targeting protection lock that they put us through. So I just stopped playing monsters at one point just to get in some of the daily stuff, because I activated certain things and I went towards the quests. So surrendering is never an option, especially not in this series. They played a fun deck. Well, you can debate if it's fun or not. I like Monarchs, but it's not necessarily a fun deck, is it? And I wanted to reward them for playing something different than some of the other people on this ladder usually. And what this is, you will be seeing soon as well. we have lost this. We are at 2-2 right now, not too shabby, but keep in mind it's gold, and that's why you see quite the variety of different decks. Can be quite fun from time to time, but obviously you want to aim a bit higher with a deck that is Marincess especially. Can we go into halftime with a positive score? Let's figure this out. The hand looks decent, not too bad, not too great, depends on what we get off of the blue tang, excavate. The opponent is playing a 60 card deck. That could be anything. Hopefully it is not something that with that grass, but since we managed to go first, if I can put up the spell trap negate, then maybe there's something that we can be doing about, even if they, well, of course will draw into the Scarlet Knot. We will see if it even is one of these decks or what it is in the end. Signet Mining here first, just get one card to the graveyard and hopefully fetch an Ash Blossom so we can combo off a little bit more. If they didn't use any of this, we can go for our normal combo here. Marincess Blue Slug, keeping the zones open, getting this card back, and they DD Crow it. It's a thing, works out against Tearlaments from time to time, so we have to improvise a little bit. Sea Angel, not too bad to get off, chain blocking it with Blue Tang in the graveyard, and we get a Marincess Wave as well for our troubles, so very, very, very good start. Going into Battle Ocean here, activating Battle Ocean now, could have activated at the latest stage possible as well. Going into Coral Enemy, getting another card back, going for Blue Tang here doesn't really overly matter too much because it will be linked off for Crystal Heart, and with Crystal Heart going into Argonaut. We could have gone into, just wanted to mention that because you haven't seen it yet, and I usually play this combo a bit more often, go into the Marbled one, so I can get one card from my graveyard either back to my hand or back to the extra deck, and from that point onwards proceed with that. Usually I try to aim for getting Marbled Rocks and Crystal Heart. That is very possible. Sometimes I screw it up a bit, sometimes the opponent screws it up. Like if we could have added our card back here, then I would have been able to go to that combo, but here decided the ineffectiveness is still the best. I like to go for that, even though I have Marincess Wave, just because if the opponent uses 2 spell traps that would get rid of my monster, then I still have a way of being unaffected and can sit through this, other than if the opponent doesn't have a monster I can use Wave on, then the ineffectiveness added by Marincess Wave doesn't even come to play because you can't negate your own monster effect, for example, and so on and so on and so on. So I sometimes feel like it's better to use Crystal Heart, especially in the budget build, in comparison to just rely on Marincess Wave making your monsters unaffected as well. Let's see what we can do. We have 3 disruptions here and an unaffected boss monster, shouldn't be too bad. They're playing some 60 card Agent Fairy mashup, which if it goes off, I must assume it's not terrible, but it also seems like a tiny bit of a mess. Don't know what their plan was here. I didn't want to let it go to that. I knew they had a tuner and I didn't want to Hyperion to use its effect in any capacity, so flipped that over and stopped their agent plays, and from that point onwards we can clear up the game very, very easily. They did surrender here because they knew the OTK was coming, so we managed to go 3-2, not too bad. Could be better, but could also be a lot worse. Moving past the halfway point, let's see what we can do. Well, it is not going first because this time I did lose the coin flip and the opponent goes first, and the opponent is on one of the most menacing decks at the moment, Tearlaments Ishizu. Very, very fun. And they opened with the 1 Foolish Burial Goods, sent Exchange to the graveyard for some reason. They just want to go do their combos here. I don't know. There's probably something about this that I don't understand. Getting Exchange of the Spirit live. I guess it's always something good to have live, especially in Tearlaments, because you can get lots of stuff to the graveyard. It is like that. So we have to be dealing with this one as well. They go through all the lines and we have nothing that can disrupt them here whatsoever. You will see a very boring gameplay till both of us will make mistakes eventually. And I'm not going to say I had a small comeback, because I wouldn't really call it that, but in the end something did happen that brought me into this game at least a tiny bit. You can already kind of guess by how I phrased my sentences here that this is not going to be a win. I don't like that everybody's going into Mud Dragon now, because it does screw me up with my targeting removal and targeting, well, anything targeting really, and that is what Marincess do quite a lot, especially in a budget build, so we have a bit of an issue with this one. They started their turn with, well, usually it's quite fine. The thing is we cannot target Rukalos. I kind of wanted to get rid of Rukalos here. Forgot that Rukalos isn't dark in comparison to some of the other Tearlaments, but it's water, so I cannot flip this one down. So I went for Time Thief Redoer instead, just to get that effect out, and then they can trigger Tearlaments, Rhinoheart, not as good in theory if they don't have a card in hand that they can send to the graveyard, but I assume if they do it, they will have one in the graveyard that they can use and then go into the other fusion. But if we get this out now, then at least they can't shuffle a card on our field to back into our deck. So forcing this or Kid Colossus out now felt like it was the right choice to do. They use more of the effects, they add stuff. I decided to negate Kid Colossus, and they use the other negate that they have to get rid of another card in their hand, annoyingly. But better now getting rid of the negate than later on, because we actually want to be doing combos. They go into Dragstapelia, sending more cards to the graveyard, milling Merly. No matter what they go into, it doesn't really matter unless it is invoked Kaliga. Fun fact, they did play an engine to go into Kaliga, so what we did here is we are royally screwed with this one. We've got lots of stuff in our graveyard, as you can see from the mills. Nothing that overly helps us though, because we can only activate one monster effect. We can only attempt to activate one monster effect per turn. So can they, so technically they cannot use this and this together, or and this, but with one monster effect we are not gonna get all that far in here, because we use monster effects to climb the link ladder, and there's nothing much we can be doing. We have Marincess Wave though, but Wave can only be used if from the hand if you control a Link 3 or higher Marincess monster, which we will not be able to get into because we can't use Coral Anemone really, because we don't have two summons beforehand, so we'd have to use some effects beforehand, and at that point it didn't really matter. So what I decided to do is use the effect of my past colors in the graveyard to get Marincess Dive back to the hand. And I thought maybe with this I can't be doing anything the next turn if there's going to be a next turn, or this turn, but yeah, nothing much with one monster effect that can be done, because we cannot, even with this, even summoning a monster from the deck, plus they have Rucolo, so they cannot activate any other monster effects now, but there's nothing else that we can be doing anyway as well, because we already used our one monster effect now. Very, very difficult indeed here. Technically this should stop their place a little bit as well, but it won't, because they can just link it off, exceed it off, and keep on going with this. I decided to go for the blue slug stuff now, but I cannot use the blue slug combo anyway. I just thought maybe having one link monster up and having Marincess Wave then might make a difference here. If will it? Not overly. I can stop them from tagging out and getting into a card that could destroy some of my stuff, but also I could have kept this for any other good effect, which I probably should have, but at this point I thought maybe my monsters are going to be unaffected by stuff, but I think that only works if you have a link 2 or higher monster, so yeah, something to keep in mind. But they can't finish me here, and now, well, something a bit awkward is going to happen. I will be staging a small comeback because they use their effects on something completely useless here. They get another draw in, which doesn't really matter for us, and now they use Dragstapelia to negate the effect of a monster that has no effect on board that's even remotely relevant, and they also use their shuffle bags, which they should have really kept. If they knew Marincess even the slightest, then they would have known that the shuffle bag effects are really, really good against Marincess, because there's so many things in the graveyard that they target, and that you then can get rid of. So yeah, a bit annoying that they didn't play this to the fullest, but it does help me out in, well, tiny bit, a really, really tiny bit. It won't make much of a difference, but there's obviously that that you have to keep in mind from time to time. They research more stuff, doesn't really matter here. We can now go into some place. They negate this here, and there was a different play that I could have done. I could have brought back some of the cards by the graveyards and then did it a tiny bit differently, but Rucolo is quite annoying against Marincess anyway, because there's so many effects that do special summon something. And in the end, that, well, didn't screw us up, because we kind of wanted to go into a Coral Anemone, and it's good that they don't have a negate for it anymore, so we can do some plays. Didn't want them to negate that one, which if they would have, that would have also screwed us up big time. So we can get Blue Tang back. We can now use the Blue Tang effect to hopefully get into another card. We can shuffle stuff back to our hand. We could go into the link 4 here. We can get another wave, which is very good, but I decided to go for Pascalos because I think I can add the wave back from the graveyard anyway. Banish this, so get into more play, so we can go into the whole Crystal Heart combo as well. We can get wave back. So we have a bounce as well with this one. Well, didn't decide to go for the Crystal Heart actually, because I still have the wave and it didn't overly matter too much, and I wanted to have the bounce live so I can get Spring Girl back to the hand and bounce one of their cards, because this is the only way I thought I was going to be able to get rid of their plays in the first place. And I decided to go for Dragstapelion. Then I can still attack over stuff. I can decide to get Pascalis out, and now we can attack over some of the things. I decided to not go into rank 4 here because I don't have a good one. If I had Abyss Dweller, that would obviously would have been very, very nice. It wouldn't have mattered in the end, and you will see exactly why that is in a second. Right now they have 3 monsters on board, but they will have a 4th one very, very, very soon. And then we are in a bit of trouble because, well, they do fusion combos and they can spin stuff back and they can do loads of different things here. Kaleido Heart can be targeted though, so I felt like, yeah, maybe Marincess wave that one because I don't want to use my thing. And then they link it all off into Underworld Goddess of Underworld Goddess. The thing is, this is one of Marincess' biggest weaknesses if you let your opponent establish somewhat of a board, because this one can get rid of your card even if it's unaffected by effects, because you use it as a material, and then from that point onwards, with 200 life points remaining, there's nothing we could have done anymore at this stage. So sadly, this one goes down to Tearlaments, although we didn't play it perfectly, they didn't play it perfectly. But in the end, there's a massive gap in power between budget Marincess and full power Tearlaments Ishizu cards. It is what it is. Of course, we do not want this to be the last hurrah for this deck. We still have 4 more duels to go, and we can get some more victories in, at least I hope. The hand with Ash Blossom, Marincess Wave, Forbidden Chalice, and not the best Marincess extenders, but some at least, will still carry us to something here. We start off our plays by normal summoning the Basilalima and going into Marincess Sea Angel here to get Marincess Dive. It's mainly because I didn't have enough cards to complete the whole combo, because I didn't have any card that I could special summon from my hand here anyway. But since I have Wave, it didn't really matter because we can still make the monster unaffected, and now we can go into a Link 4 in theory, but I decided it would possibly be better to do this because I can't equip the Link 4 anyway, and with this one I can at least add stuff back to the hand, and we still have Wave live, so we have 3 disruptions here and a monster that can protect itself for battle ones. Don't really want to do it because then you use your only monster in hand, and we're playing against Synchron, which mainly going into a Chaos Ruler. For some reason they do not use the effect here. It wouldn't have mattered because we had 3 negates to deal with it, but I don't know why. Maybe they clicked on no by I don't know, by chance, don't know, by mistake. Yeah, they do this kind of stuff, draw 1 card, then link it off into Hot Dragon Archfiend Abyss. They they wanted to get one of the searchers, and they can because they have one called by the grave here, so we cannot deny them the Junk Synchron search for the next turn. They decide to get rid of our monster. I decided not to protect it by battle. I possibly should have, because now they can get 1 monster back, but the thing is, if we just have this monster on board, in the end, it would have been fine if I discarded this, because Marble Rock can add it back to the hand again, and then we could still go into the Link 4 and we could still go the whole place. So in the end, I probably should have protected by battle here, because then they wouldn't have gotten more resources. But at the time, I forgot about Marble Rock's effect of adding stuff back to the hand, and yeah. In the end, that was a mistake. I should have discarded this and then just added it back to the hand, even if I didn't have any other Marincess monsters left, because then I could have gone into Battle Ocean, and then with Battle Ocean, Marincess Dive would have been super live, and I could have gotten any good monster out of the deck here, and so they gain more resources, and I lose a Link 3 and cannot use Marincess Wave now during my turn till I have established a Link 3 again. Luckily, we draw into Seahorse, which enables us to do lots of combos, and if they try to negate one of our stuff, we still have the Forbidden Chalice live here. They try to negate it, we negate their monster doesn't do anything anymore, and now we can go into the best plays possible. We can search Battle Ocean, and with Marincess Dive in hand, in combination with Battle Ocean, we can go into Blue Tang, and Blue Tang Clan is one of the best cards that this deck has to offer. We can send stuff to the graveyard that we could revive now. We also dig for more cards here. I did decide to go for the second wave just in case for the next turn, so we can shut down everything they do, because this isn't hard once per turn. Yay! Crystal Heart play, so we have an unaffected boss monster that now has a very, very, very big protection and big attack stats, so we can get rid of Hot Dragon Archfiend Abyss, and from that point onwards there's not all that much they can be doing, because we have disruptions on end. We have one spell trap negate, we have two monster negates. This card is unaffected, this card has high attack points, and we can summon out Marbled Rock, obviously negate this one, and at this point they concede because there's nothing else they can be doing after their normal summon. And with them knowing I still have a spell trap negate and a monster negate on board as well. Well, this was a rather easy victory because we did get to go first and there was no disruption whatsoever. Hopefully this streak of wins can continue, and hopefully you're not sick of the classic go into Argonaut plays just yet. Look at us going first again, and this is against Exosister. It will be a very uphill battle at the very first bit because the opponent started with, well, let's say some disruptions in the hand. You will see exactly what I mean. We started to play out with Silent Mining to get Wraith to the graveyard because we can add it back just to see if they have an Ash Blossom possibly. Now going to Piscalis, and they use Maxi. Gladly we drew into our one-off Ash Blossom, but you know, sometimes a bit of luck needs a little bit of counter luck from us here, because if they draw Maxi, then why can't we also have Ash Blossom? Otherwise, we would have probably been in a very big spot of bother because we would have let them draw at least like 4 or 5 cards, which is very annoying. But that it does take that, sadly, to get any plays started, any of the Marincess plays. So this is a bit of an issue, and they chain the impermanence, so we don't get to summon a monster from hand. Kind of a wasted impermanence at this point because it didn't really matter all that much. There's still enough ways to get things back from the hand and to do stuff. Could have saved Blue Slug here, but I felt like why not get Pascalis back. Could have helped us next turn to add one of the Marincess spell traps from our graveyard to the hand, but we can technically still discard it at one point with Marbled Rocks if they decided to attack us. Then there's still a way to send this to the graveyard, so it's not during the same turn that was sent to the graveyard, because then it would be our turn again, because we do this during the opponent's turn, so we were fine. And now I thought, oh, why not do this? Why not add the stuff back to the hand? I could have done it a bit differently here. I could have chain blocked possibly at one point, but I didn't have a way to special summon Blue Tang, so I thought, I don't think there was much of a way to prevent this, and I'd rather them use the Infinite Impermanence now than when I use the combo of going into my Marincess Caught an Enemy, because if you negate this then I won't even end on a link 3, and I do kind of need the link 3 first of all to add stuff back. The wave is very important here, and also to be able to, well, do some battle protection and possibly get me to the next turn. So this isn't the worst outcome, but it's not a great outcome because now we can't do the crazy plays. We have to stick for something that is a bit suboptimal and not all that nice. But we will survive this because now we've played through, well, kind of through this 3 disruptions, although the Maxi didn't do all that much. We can get waved back by an enemy, and now we can add Seahorse back, so we look very strong for the next turn. We have unaffected stuff, we have battle protection, so technically Marbled Rock should survive in 90% of all cases, and we do have plays for the next turn, so there is that one. They also drew into packs. What a hand. 3 hand traps and packs to start the Exosister plays with a 1 card play starter. Very upsetting, and we only have 1 disruption here, but 1 disruption can be enough against Exosisters if you time it just right and depending on their hand. They made a bit of a mistake here. They summoned Sophia, I think it is, Stella, the one that summons from hand, and then they didn't keep it on board but kept this one on board. I would have kept Stella on board just to see if, because they know I have a Marincess Wave in hand, and used the other 2, because then technically if I negate the effect of Michaelis, well, technically they could still have another Ellis in hand and still do the plays. But if Stella is still on board, I have to maybe think of, oh, but if I negate this now and then they still have Stella, they can still go into their massive boss monster, and then I'm a bit screwed. So do I keep this negate? Do I not keep this negate? Now I could keep the negate open because I know they already used packs, so whatever spell trap they get isn't going to hurt me too much in the long run if I stop them from going into their crazy boss monster. So that is my thoughts here, because Stella was already gone. They're searching stuff, they're going for the trap cards. I didn't negate this because I knew they could have just chained the effect then, and when they chain the effect they can still get rid of my Marincess monster, because then it's not unaffected because the chain, that's how the chain resolves. So I thought, let's wait till they try to get rid of my Marincess monster by card effect and then Marincess Wave here, unless they have some other plays. So they try to get rid of it now, and I was like, yeah, no. Battle protection as well, Seahorse to the graveyard, because Seahorse can be helpful from the graveyard because it can special summon Pascalis, Pascalis can special summon Blue Tang, and so on and so on and so on. But we can also normal summon it when they get rid of my monster with the trap cards. Let's see what they are going to do. It's going to be a bit upsetting for us, but not all that annoying. They use the card here before we can do anything, but they don't use it to banish one card in our field. They use it to banish a card in our graveyard so they can get the effect of Martha off and summon the Exosister monster that stops us from summoning monsters from the graveyard. Little do they know, doesn't really matter all that much at this stage anymore if we have this or not, because we are already very, very, very okay with this. They now lock us out of the summoning from graveyard. Doesn't matter. Seahorse can now summon one monster from the hand. We use pass color's effect. We send Blue Tang, send a card that we can then special summon from the hand if we add it back to our hand. Now they have another Ash Blossom here, so we still can get into Battle Ocean. Very upsetting. Could have played around this if I summoned the positions a bit differently, because if I would have summoned it a bit differently, I could have used Blue Tang as the material for Sea Angel, and when using Blue Tang as the material for Sea Angel, then you can chain block with Blue Tang's effect, then they can Ash this one, but they can't Ash Sea Angel, and would have been a bit better here because we would have been able to get the Battle Ocean like this. We didn't. Bit problematic from time to time, but didn't matter in the end too much. Just something to keep in mind. It's always good to chain block Sea Angel because a lot of the time you do want Battle Ocean in your hand, and this is a way of guaranteeing that this goes through, unless your opponent obviously has impermanence or effect veiler or some sort, then it will not. Now using Blue Slug to get into Spring Girl again, because we can still summon this one, summon Spring Girl, go into lots of different plays. We link off into another Marbled Rocks here. We use Spring Girl's effect, we use Blue Tang's effect. Let's see if we can get into anything crazy. No, just another Blue Tang, nothing that helps us immediately here. We burn a little bit, we add the Coral Enemy back, we go into Argonaut, because with Argonaut we can now bounce a card because we still have the normal summon. We bounce their monster, and at this point they concede because we have a somewhat annoying board. Next turn they would really rely on just having the one card in hand that does stuff for them, and we would be able to recycle one other card from our deck to our hand. That would be Marincess Wave, so we could still stop them from doing this. Then we could do it all again and again, even though we screwed up the Battle Ocean thing. Imagine we hadn't screwed this up, then we would have been in a even better position at this point. So another victory that goes towards us. Going first is really something that this deck prefers. You can really tell why that is as well. Let's move on to the last two replays. Second last duel, and sadly their sleeves are already given away what we're up against. It is Tearlaments again. Sadly we are going second again as well, so very, very, very bad starting moments. They have Medora sent to the graveyard, the card that mills, and with that one we are in a bit of a trouble here because they obviously can start loads of their combos. But this one might be somewhat new on Tearlaments, or did take a wrong turn eventually at some point, because they will end up on stuff that, well, for some reason just Dragostapelia, and now we mill some more things. We hit a Scream, which is fine, they get a Trap, so they have all of this kind of stuff. They shuffle their things back, so they don't keep the shuffle for our turn, which don't know if that's good or not. They summon Elf here, and now go into Merly again, so have one Tearlaments monster on board, so the Trap's life and the Monster Negate is life, and they still have Spright Elf if they get rid of Merly, and the Trap gets rid of Merly, so they can fusion summon again. So technically still a very, 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 very strong board. We can stop the Dragostapelia negate here because we do have Forbidden Chalice. Technically we could also stop Spright Elf from summoning stuff back, but we cannot do anything about the Trap card, sadly. Doesn't matter in the end, because they will be doing something that is a bit suboptimal on their side of the place. They will use the Trap here, fair enough. They negate the effect, doesn't really matter. You wouldn't usually do this because I don't think they're sent to the graveyard. Like, it can stop them if their hand is playing very, very little Marincess extenders, then yes, this can stop it, because then you just have one Marincess monster on board. Even if you then go into Seahorse, you just get Blue Tang back and you can't continue. For us, didn't really matter overly that much because we already have some extenders in hand anyway. We still have Moray of Greed to draw into some more useful cards here as well. So for us, that negate did nothing, but it can be, well, it can work out for them, so I wouldn't blame them too much on using it here. Also, now is where it gets a bit problematic, because they do get their Tearlaments plays out, but if you look at the cards, because they did shuffle stuff back and they didn't have that much in the graveyard before, if you look at it closely, what are they going to fusion with? You assume something in the hand, right? Well, about that, they didn't realize that they didn't have enough materials for anything else, so they got rid of their Dragostapelia, their Predator Plant monster, and the only thing they had was being able to go into Mud Dragon of the Swamp. And obviously Mud Dragon of the Swamp doesn't do all that much, and now they can't even use the Spright Elf effect because obviously Merly shuffles itself back into the deck. So yeah, nothing even getting off of these kind of mills, so possibly was a bit premature to use all of this in sequence. It is what it is from time to time. I decided to go for Battle Ocean here because I have Sleepy Maiden and I can go into the cards. They use the effect to shuffle stuff back now. That does not stop my effects in the graveyard, that just shuffles my card back to the deck, and we get into Battle Ocean here without their help as well. I make a tiny mistake because I didn't realize they already got into Marincess Dive, so technically I could have used the Sea Angel thing here to search it. But yeah, doesn't really overly matter because I obviously didn't know I was going to excavate Battle Ocean here anyway. So we've lost out on this effect, but there wasn't anything we could have done from it. Anyway, the only thing that I could have done is once I saw this, then not grab Battle Ocean and grab the other Marincess monster that I excavated would have been a better play here, because then I could have still used Marincess Sea Angel's effect and actually gotten Battle Ocean. So I decided to grab Battle Ocean off of Blue Tang, and I shouldn't have. I should have gone for the other Marincess name just in terms of card advantage here. Didn't make much of an issue of a difference in the end, but that is just the more optimal play because you get one more card in hand. They make everything fire, so I cannot target them. Do I care about targeting them? Not really. They do not seem to have any other plays. No Havness in hand either. Woo. And from this point onwards, we can continue our plays. I still have Moray and Greet in hand. I could have used it in between to hopefully draw into something else. But at this point, I didn't really need to because all my plays are already here. I decide to get Dive back to hand at this point because now I can actually go into some more crazy combos. I can go to the Spring Girl. I can get Spring Girl back to the hand and get rid of the Jab card so they can't use it during their turn with whatever they have in hand. And now I had to, well, kind of make the decision between do I get rid of Spright Elf or do I get rid of Mud Dragon? Probably should have gotten rid of Mud Dragon because they didn't have any other level 2s that they could have used, but who knows. I thought dealing with Elf was a tiny bit better here, but in the end you don't really know. Could have used Spring Girl here to get one more monster on board, but I felt like it didn't really matter too much. We have Wave, we have Forbidden Chalice. Not much they can be doing unless they draw something really crazy. They didn't. They wanted to go for more of a mill kind of thing. Could have gone for anything here. Doesn't really matter whatever rank 4 they went to. Even Baguska wouldn't have done anything here. So yeah, I obviously don't want them to do this in the slightest. Because that would be bad if they built something very, very helpful for them, and we do not want this to happen. We draw into another Forbidden Chalice. They have Maxi. Not that really matters. We need exactly one special summon to finish this duel because this one, and now we can normal special summon this card and go for a game here because one of the traps we know is the Tearlament trap, and the other stuff doesn't really matter unless it possibly is Mirror Force, because then we still wouldn't be able to finish the game here. Doesn't overly matter at this point, so we decided to go for a game and attack here, and woo, we did scrape a win against Tearlaments, albeit that they screwed up their combo at one point and left themselves without any good card on board. But their first turn play didn't seem too strong in the first place. They could have had more of the shuffle backs from the graveyard, and we would have been a bit more screwed if they kept some of their things, but considering what they had, and with the mills and everything, it didn't work out too well for them in the first place. The only thing they could have done is not use the Merly effect to fusion summon. I would have still negated the Predator Plant monster, so it wouldn't have mattered all that much. They could have then summoned the Merly back and hopefully milled into another Tearlaments card, and that might have gotten them into the Tearlaments place, and then I wouldn't have been able to deal with that. So this would have possibly been better, but I guess their starting play also wasn't all that strong. Let's see if we can finish this whole series on a high note in the last replay. And in the last replay, we managed to go first. Woohoo! Will this be one last time that we can get into a win here on the series? Well, we are playing against, I want to say pure Spright. Well, obviously there's level 2 engines in here, but it's just Spright. It's not anything else like Runic or whatnots. And that can be problematic because they do have that spell that boosts their attack. And if I have to negate anything else before this one, then they have an easier time to beat over, let's say, 3700 attack point Argonaut than other decks would have. So at this point, we might be in a bit of an issue, but it won't even come to that. This isn't going to be the final ending on a good no duel. It is the last hooray of this deck, basically. Because we will be running into some adversity here. First of all, Maxi, which is already not good for us, but we have to go into combos here. We can, technically you could just be like, okay, stop the turn here, they got one draw of it, let's leave it at that. But against a good deck, is this going to help? You know, Spright would have completely completely destroyed us here. So yeah, I had to go for the combos. Obviously didn't know it was Spright, but usually if you play against somewhat competent decks, they don't do too well with having to only deal with the 2 monsters. Like, they have a very easy time, as well, to say, clearing 2 monsters on board and finishing off the game. So I decided to go for the full combos here, and they decide to Nibiru, and there's nothing else I can be doing because now I have no monsters on board that help me whatsoever. They have a starting hand now plus this card of 7, so yeah, I don't think it takes a medium to know what's going to happen next. This is not going to go in our favor. They have their level 2 engine. They can do whatever they want. They go for the Sacred Beast engine. It's quite fun. Gigantic Spright. Interesting combo. We've seen this plenty of times as well. Spright Blue, Spright Jet, and then they can do whatnots. But no, they also have Swap Frog and some water monsters in hand, so they can go into these combos as well. And at this point, they have Spright Gamma Burst, what I was talking about. They can beat over this token with not much of any effort. We have very much lost this one because at this point they are very stacked, and there's nothing we can be doing about this, even in the slightest here. And that is concluded this series with a loss, sadly, but we were up against Nibiru, and this deck doesn't perform well against it because there's no negates that we can really put up, especially not since they got rid of Totally Awesome in this simulator here in Master Duel. Without Totally Awesome, yeah, you don't do all that much against Nibiru, so this basically just shuts you down anyway. Sad times. Hope you enjoyed the series. You might have guessed how good this deck is at this point. You can clearly see the weaknesses, you can clearly see the strengths. Argonaut is a very good card, but it has obvious weaknesses. Some of the hand traps hurt you, some of the hand traps hurt you rather less. Depends on the timing of your opponent. If they don't know Marincess, which can happen, isn't always great. There's so much they could negate with either Ash Blossom or Impermanence or Veiler that they sometimes don't know what the crucial bits are, so you can get away with a bit more than with other decks where the choke points are fairly obvious. With Marincess, they're just somewhat obvious, so you have that going for you, but there's obvious massive weaknesses. Kaijus, we haven't seen this a single time, but Kaijus are also terrifying to deal with. Other than that, the deck can put up a somewhat decent, somewhat impressive board, and if you add some other good stuff cards to it, some other hand traps, then going second might not be as bad as well as it looked like in this series, for example. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, but most importantly, I hope you have a good day.